Picture this, 8,700 meters above the world. Night has swallowed the mountain. A blizzard screams sideways. Your oxygen is gone. Your hands are frozen claws. Your client, a man who trusted you with his life, has just slipped away in the snow beside you. You're alone. Hypothermia is closing in like a silent killer. And yet, you pick up the satellite phone. Your voice, steady as steel, reaches your pregnant wife half a world away in New Zealand. I love you, you say. Sleep well, my sweetheart. Please don't worry too much. That voice belonged to Rob Hall, the man who turned guiding Everest into a business, the man who stood on top of the world 5 times, the man whose final choice in the 1996 disaster still haunts climbers and dreamers everywhere. Who was Rob Hall? And how did one of the greatest high-altitude guides in history end up dying alone on the South Summit, just 300 meters from the top of the planet? This is his story, raw, real, and full of lessons that hit harder than any storm. Stick with me through every twist, because what happened on May 10th and 11th, 1996, changed mountaineering forever. Robert Edwin Hall was born on January 14th, 1961, in Christchurch, New Zealand, a quiet city on the South Island where the Southern Alps rise like a wall against the sky. Growing up in a modest family, young Rob didn't dream of fame or fortune. He dreamed of rock and ice. The mountains were right there, calling him every single day. By his teens, Rob was already sneaking off to climb. He left school early and worked designing outdoor gear, tents, jackets, ropes, anything that let him test the limits himself. In 1980, still a teenager, he traveled to the Himalayas and stood on Ama Dablam, a 6,800-meter beast known as the Matterhorn of the East. 1 year later, he climbed No. Back home, he pulled off the first winter ascent of Mount Cook's Caroline Face, a suicidal wall of ice that most Kiwis still talk about in hushed tones. Friends described him as quiet, thoughtful, almost cerebral, not the loud, chest-thumping type. Rob was the guy who planned everything twice and executed once. As one climbing partner later said, Rob didn't just climb mountains. He respected them like old friends who could turn on you in a heartbeat. By the late 1980s, Rob teamed up with fellow New Zealander Gary Ball. Together, they became unstoppable. In 1990, they stood on Everest's summit for the first time with Peter Hillary, son of Sir Edmund Hillary himself. Then, in just 7 months, they knocked off the 7 summits, the highest peak on every continent. It was a world record pace. But Rob wasn't chasing records for glory. He was thinking bigger. He saw ordinary people, doctors, teachers, business owners from places like the United States, who had the money and the dream but not the experience. Why keep the world's highest mountain only for elite climbers? Why not make it possible for anyone, if they trained hard enough and followed the rules? That question changed everything. But it also planted the first seed of tragedy. Think about it. What if your passion becomes? In 1991, Rob and Gary Ball founded Hall and Ball Adventure Consultants. Their mission was simple yet revolutionary. Guide paying clients safely to the top of Everest and other 8,000-meter giants. They charged serious money, around $65,000 per climber in today's dollars. But they delivered results. Their first commercial Everest expedition in 1992 was a smash success. 6 clients reached the summit. For Sherpas too, the world took notice. Suddenly, commercial guiding on Everest wasn't a crazy idea. It was the future. Tragedy hit in 1993 when Gary Ball died of cerebral edema on a climb in the Himalayas. Rob was devastated, but he kept the company alive, renaming it simply Adventure Consultants. He poured everything into making it the safest, most professional outfit on the mountain. By 1994 and 1995, Rob had guided more than 30 people to Everest's summit. He set strict rules. Turn around by 2 p.m. no matter what. Use supplemental oxygen above 8,000 meters.
Fix ropes properly.
Respect the weather window. Clients loved him because he was calm under pressure. As one American climber put it later, Rob made you feel like the mountain was a puzzle he had already solved. He married Jan Arnold, a doctor and fellow climber who had summited Everest with him. In 1996, Jan was pregnant with their first child, a daughter they would name Sarah. Life was good. Adventure consultants had a waiting list. Rob was 35, at the peak of his powers, and the mountain he loved seemed to trust him back. But 1996 was different. Two big commercial teams were on the mountain that season. Rob's Adventure Consultants and Scott Fisher's Mountain Madness out of the United States. More than 30 clients between them. The mountain was crowded, and the weather window looked perfect. Until it didn't. Would you have seen the warning signs? Or would the success of past years have made you believe this time would be just like the others? May 1996. Base camp buzzed with excitement. Rob's team included strong guides. Andy Harris from New Zealand and Mike Groom from Australia. Clients came from all over, including Americans like Doug Hansen, a postal worker from Washington State who had turned back just below the summit the year before. Doug was determined. He told Rob, "I've got to make it this time." Rob had his famous 2 p.m. turnaround rule printed on every briefing sheet. He drilled it into everyone. No summit is worth dying for. The plan was solid. Sherpas fixed ropes up the Lhotse face and through the dangerous Khumbu icefall. Oxygen bottles were stockpiled at Camp 4 on the South Kernel. On May 10th, the weather was textbook perfect, light winds, blue skies. Both teams launched their summit bids together. That was the first crack in the plan. Too many people on the same route at the same time. The fixed ropes became a traffic jam in the famous Hillary Step, a 12-meter vertical rock wall near the top. Rob's group moved slowly but steadily. Doug Hansen was struggling but pushing hard. By early afternoon, they were still climbing. Rob knew the time, but he also knew Doug's dream. He made a call that would haunt him. They would keep going. As John Krakauer wrote in his best-selling book Into Thin Air, the definitive account from someone who was actually there, Rob was a man who lived by his own rules, until the one moment when breaking them seemed like the only humane thing to do. The summit was reached late. Rob and Doug stood on top around 4 p.m., 2 hours past the safety cutoff. Photos were taken, hugs exchanged, but the clock was now their enemy. Down below, the storm was already forming over the Tibetan Plateau. A deadly cocktail of high winds and sudden temperature drop was racing toward them. Have you ever bent your own rules for someone you cared about? In the death zone, where every minute costs you brain cells, that decision can cost lives. The descent should have been straightforward. But exhaustion, thin air, and the growing crowd turned the ridge into chaos. Clients from both teams were tangled on the ropes. Oxygen was running low. Darkness was coming fast. Doug Hansen collapsed from fatigue just below the summit. He couldn't move. Rob refused to leave him. "I'm not going without my client," he radioed down to base camp. Meanwhile, a ferocious blizzard slammed into the mountain. Visibility dropped to 0. Winds hit 80 miles per hour. Temperatures plunged to -40. The fixed ropes iced over. Climbers were literally fighting for their lives just to stay upright. Andy Harris, one of Rob's own guides, disappeared into the whiteout. Yasuko Namba, a Japanese client on Rob's team, collapsed and later died. Mike Groom and others fought their way down to Camp 4, frostbitten and half dead. Rob and Doug were trapped above the Hillary Step, huddled against the storm. Rob's hands froze solid. He couldn't clip or unclip carabiners. Doug slipped away sometime in the night of May 10th to 11th. Rob was now completely alone, yet he kept making radio calls. His voice stayed calm, professional, even as hypothermia set in. He described his exact position so rescuers could try to reach him. Twice, Sherpas and guides attempted a rescue from Camp 4, but the storm turned them back. Imagine it, you're the leader. You've guided dozens safely before. Now your own team is scattered across the mountain, some already gone. And you're sitting there, freezing, still trying to save the one man you stayed for. By 4:35 a.m. on May 11th, Base Camp heard Rob's voice crackle over the radio again. He was still alive. Barely. He had survived the night exposed on the south summit. But he was too weak to move. His hands were useless. His oxygen was finished. Then came the most heartbreaking call of all. Using a satellite phone, Rob spoke directly to his wife Jen back in New Zealand. She was 8 months pregnant. Their daughter Sarah would be born just weeks later. "I love you," Rob said, his voice weak but steady. "Sleep well, my sweetheart. Please don't worry too much." Those words, broadcast around the world within hours, became instant legend. They showed a man facing death with dignity, love, and quiet strength. No panique, no blame, just love for his family and acceptance of the mountain's verdict. Rescuers tried one last time at first light. They couldn't reach him. The storm had won. Rob Hall died on May 11, 1996, of exposure and hypothermia. His body was found days later by the IMAX film crew, still sitting upright, facing the summit he loved. At his wife's request, he was left there, exactly where he would have wanted to stay. In total, 8 climbers died in the 1996 disaster, the deadliest single day in Everest history at the time. Rob's team lost 4. Himself, guide Andy Harris, client Doug Hansen, and client Yasuko Namba. Scott Fisher from the rival team also perished. The world watched in real time thanks to early satellite technology and the internet. It was the first Everest disaster broadcast live to living rooms everywhere. Rob Hall's death wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of a new chapter in mountaineering. Adventure Consultants continues today under new leadership. They still guide climbers, but with even stricter safety protocols born from that terrible night. Rob's 2 p.m. turnaround rule became gospel for every commercial team on Everest. His story forced the world to ask hard questions. Should anyone be guiding paying clients to 8,000 meters? Is commercial Everest ethical when the mountain demands such a high price? What does success really mean when lives are on the line? John Krakauer's Into Thin Air, which became a massive bestseller, captured Rob's professionalism and humanity. The 2015 Hollywood movie Everest portrayed him with Jason Clarke in the lead role, bringing his final hours to millions more. But the deepest lesson is simpler and more human. Rob Hall showed that true leadership isn't about always being right. It's about staying with your people when everything falls apart. It's about love in the face of death. It's about keeping your dignity when the mountain tries to strip it away. For all of us, whether we climb mountains or just face everyday storms, Rob's final call to his wife is a reminder. In your darkest moment, choose love. Choose calm. Choose to leave the world a little better than you found it. He was 35 years old, a husband, a soon-to-be father, a pioneer who opened the world's highest peak to dreamers from every corner of the globe. And in the end, he chose to stay with a struggling client rather than save himself. That is who Rob Hall was. That is how he died. His body still sits on the south summit, a silent guardian watching over every climber who passes. And every time someone stands on top of Everest today and looks down toward that spot, they remember, the mountain doesn't care who you are, but the people you leave behind, they remember everything. So next time life puts you in your own death zone, whether it's a tough decision at work, a crisis with family, or a dream that feels impossible, ask yourself, would I stay for someone else the way Rob stayed for Doug? Would I keep my voice calm and my heart open when everything else is falling apart? Rob Hall's story says yes. Always yes. If the story hit you, if it made you think about courage, leadership, or what really matters when the storm hits, hit that like button right now. Subscribe so you never miss another real-life tale from the edge of human endurance. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Rob's boots on that final night? Would you have turned back earlier or stayed with your client no matter what? And if you want to honor the legacy, check out Adventure Consultants' current expeditions or support high-altitude safety training programs. Links are in the description. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Stay safe out there. Respect the mountains. And remember, the greatest summits aren't always the ones at the top. Sometimes they're the choices you make when no one is watching.